Hey guys, what's up? Today we're covering Tier 2 of the climbing iceberg. This is basically a way of classifying topics in climbing that go from least obscure to most obscure. So if you know these, you're probably at least somewhat involved in climbing culture and have probably exited Gumby status. So our first term on the iceberg is free climbing. This is when people have discovered that free climbing is not the same as free soloing. And no, they do not know why it's called free climbing. The discovery of aid climbing comes a bit later. If you don't know what that is, that's okay. And no, somehow I did not realize that free climbing referred to not aid climbing until many years into my climbing career. Free soloing. This is kind of a bit double-pronged. This refers to them now using the proper term, free climbing, and for free soloing not being their favorite movie anymore. For some reason, that movie does get a lot of hate amongst climbers, and I'm really not sure why. It's relatively good. Again, not my favorite movie ever, but it gets undue hate, I think. Sportiva versus Scarpa. The Gumby, or the former Gumby at this point, this is when they buy a really expensive pair of brand name climbing shoes. For those that don't know, La Sportiva and Scarpa are basically the two kind of giants. They're the titans of the climbing industry. You'll see a lot of really good comp climbers wearing them. That monopoly's broken up a bit in recent years, but back when I was coming up competing, it was all La Sportiva and Scarpa. I'm particularly guilty of this. I remember buying a pair of La Sportivas when I was pretty young, and I went to nationals in a pair of La Sportiva slip-ons. Not my finest moment. 515 and V17 is the next category. This is when the Gumby discovers that 513 and V12 aren't the hardest things in the world, and they're about to discover Adam Ondra, which is definitely, and Daniel Woods, which is a scary thing. Also, this is generally when they discover that outside climbing and inside climbing are completely separate sports. Next subject on this list is hangboarding. One of the funniest things to see is when people who haven't even climbed for that long decide that they need to hangboard to get stronger rather than focus on building a good solid base and focus on good technique. Hangboarding is a pretty specialized tool. It does make your fingers strong though, and track progressive overload pretty easily week to week from adding weight and downsizing holds and increasing time. And this could potentially mark the climber's first finger injury. Sport climbing. Next one on this list is calisthenics. This is when the Gumby discovers, oh, I need to get stronger, even though they don't. They need better technique. This is how they build strength. And this is where they will also take a detour for 6 months because they think planches are awesome and front levers are awesome, which they are. Campusing. This is another potential path the former Gumby might take where they're like, oh, I need to get stronger. I will climb without feet. I will do every route without footwork for the next 6 months. They will not stop this unless they get into calisthenics. And now we have another movie. This is 14 Peaks. And this is when the Gumby realizes, or former Gumby at this point, realizes, wait, there are other types of climbing? It's not just rock climbing? No, this is when they get introduced to snow climbing, some ice stuff, and they're immediately over the moon for mountaineering, and mountaineering is what they focus on. Just wait until they discovered Marc-Andre Leclerc. True supremacy. Socks and shoes are evil. Yes, somewhat true, but not all the times true, especially for trad climbing. Socks and shoes are actually pretty useful. Rental shoes are for Gumbies. So I do have a funny story about this. David Lama, he was a famous climber. He came up to Alaska for a bit to do some alpine stuff, and he ended up stopping by the local gym. I remember watching him do the hardest route in the gym in rental shoes with socks. It was insane. He was a very nice guy. It's a shame that he passed. And Death Triangle. So at this point, the former Gumby has probably been outside a few times, and they went with a friend who doesn't know too much more than them, but he knows enough to tell them not to do this. An American Death Triangle is, well, there's an image on the screen right now. Basically, don't do this. If one of the bolts goes, then you shock load the other bolt and you die. Oh boy, here we get into a bit of some obscure stuff. This is when we're starting to get almost into Tier 3. I decided to put it in Tier 2, but it could have gone Tier 3. The pink point. This is kind of an archaic term. It's not super popular anymore because climbing has become a bit more homogenized. But basically, it's this archaic term that's popular in the 90s and early aughts, is when you do a route outside, but the draws are pre-placed. So if you watch a lot of Adam Ondra's projecting videos, you'll see that he already has the draws up for him. That would be technically a pink point, but this has really fallen out of vogue. I haven't heard it used much at all. I vaguely remember when I was climbing in Canada, one of the coaches using it at some point in time, but to describe an ascent that he did outside. But I don't know if I've ever heard this used in a serious context in modern times. Bit before my time. We get into the Alaska grading. This is basically a suffer grade. It kind of reflects the remoteness, storminess, and temperature of the route. Most of my mountaineering friends kind of call this the suck grade. Basically, it's rated 1 through 6. 1 would be kind of an easy glacial thing. 2 is exposed weather plus altitude. Rainier is grade 2. 3, you get some technical climbing. If you're in Colorado, think the Little Bear Traverse because you get the down climb off the slab. It's not very difficult, but it is considered somewhat technical. For 2, a good example, at least in Colorado, would be Capitol Peak. 4 is hard and difficult with techie climbing. The example I've heard is Ellingwood Ledges up on Cresto Needle. Again, another Colorado example. 5 would be difficult, sustained, high difficulty with few to no bivouac sites. This is kind of when you're starting to get into the big mountains like stuff in Alaska. I think Mount Hunter and Mount Forker are classified as 5. 6 is sustained hard climbing over thousands of feet. Again, 5 and 6 are, there's a bit of a blurred line. Hunter and Forker, I have heard people call them grade 6, but I have heard them also referred to as grade 5. For 6, just think of kind of alpine, big wall. The Scottish grades, I haven't heard too many US people use these. I hear these used in the dry tooling community a bit more. One would just be snow, maybe an easy ridge. So kind of think maybe grade 2 Alaska climbing. Grade 2 is short and steep, may require 2 axes. This is already actual mountaineering at that point. Grade 3 is a mixed descent required. I have heard Martha's called grade 3 because you get some, I think, MI5 on it for short, steep ice or advanced mix. This would be sustained ice for 70 degrees or I think above it, MI5 mix. And then grade 5 would be sustained ice up to 80 degrees or mixed with linked moves. And then grade 6 is vertical ice. Grade 7 is multi-pitch with long vertical sections or highly mixed climbing. And grade 8 would be the hardest route in Scotland. All right, that is the end of all of our discussions on grade 2. I appreciate you guys watching, and I hope you guys have a blessed day. Don't die in the mountains.